We are honored to give the family house to my son, the cornerstone of our family, who will continue our tradition. Everyone gave a clap. I didn't, because nobody said my name and I was sitting there. There was supposed to be a party, a little family meal that signified the end of an era my parents were formally retiring. They were prepared to begin a new chapter after selling the company and paying off their obligations. I was still wearing my uniform when I arrived home from work, my heels clicking on the restaurant's marble floor. Nothing had my name on it. No place card. No seat reservation. Not even a look when I got there. My younger brother Madison was already in the middle of the room, with his parents at either side. His Oscar-winning grit made him feel at ease, which he had, in a sense. There was a toast. My dad grinned with pride. Then the line that really got to me came. "We have always been able to rely on you. The family house should rightfully belong to you." "No, we adore you both. We are extremely fortunate to have 2 kids. Only him. And me?" I was seated in the far rear. I sat between a cousin who murmured, "Wait, didn't you move away?" and an aunt who couldn't remember my name. I turned to face my hands. The hospital soap had left them dry. I had just finished a 12-hour shift. There is no time to alter, no time to relax. As usual, there was about enough time to arrive. However, nobody even acknowledged my presence. After the cheer subsided, Madison got up and clinked his glass. And to Claire, my sister, "I hope you keep doing whatever it is that you do." Everyone in the room chuckled. Even my mom. I blinked slowly. I remained silent. I simply grinned, because I knew I would cry if I didn't. It was only forgetfulness, I used to tell myself, that they might have been occupied, that I could have been too silent, that perhaps they would notice me if I made a greater effort. I therefore offered to help with every task. When they needed money, they sent it. I drove home during storms to attend birthday parties when there were hardly any seats available. However, the stillness had never been so loud. Madison arrived with a drink in his hand after supper. He laughed. "You looked like you saw a ghost. Did you not think I would get the house?" I made an effort to grin. "No, Maddie. I've long since given up on having expectations." He arched an eyebrow. Then he chuckled. "You've been dramatic all your life." It was already dark when I made my way to the parking lot. The air was thick. My mother's message chimed on my phone, "Don't be angry. That house doesn't even appeal to you. You also don't have any children. This is a more logical approach." I remained motionless. She wasn't saying she was sorry. She was defending herself. I spent almost an hour sitting in the car when I arrived home. The lights in the home were off. My neighbor's dog released 2 barks. It was a calm night. Even yet, I had the impression that I was in the midst of a riot that nobody else could hear. I had trouble sleeping that night. Every memory bubbled up as if it were waiting to sting again while I lay in bed with my eyes on the ceiling. Madison received a bike and I received socks on each of our birthdays. While my scholarships were anticipated, he was commended for making the squad. My achievements were always greeted with the comment, "Well, that's what responsible girls do." When Dad lost some of his pension, I recalled the time I assisted them in paying off a piece of their mortgage. "No, thank you. Not a word. Simply put, it is the purpose of family." Then I thought about the mortgage. The house was now tied to it. That had come to him. I wasn't upset. Not quite yet. I felt empty, as if someone had hugged me while submerged beneath the sea. I refrained from crying. Not that evening. However, something changed within me. A calm, steady voice that I hadn't heard in years surged up. "You no longer owe them your quiet." For a while, I believed that I was flawed. Not in a clear-cut manner. No loud errors, no broken bones, but a silent, unseen fault, something that diminished my value as a person. Perhaps I didn't laugh aloud enough, I thought. Perhaps I didn't shine as brightly. Perhaps I didn't occupy the space that you should occupy in order to be remembered. Because I was the pause in my family. The last-minute idea. No one asked for the second piece of cake. Mom forgot it was my birthday when I was 7, so I made my own birthday cupcakes. A month prior, Madison had a magician. I used quarters from my allowance jar to purchase a platter of blue sprinkled, slightly burnt chocolate. The tray was set in the center of the table by me. "You're so independent, Claire," she said with a laugh. "One day, you'll be a fantastic wife." And the gift was that. It felt more like a label than a compliment. Madison received a telescope for his 10th birthday. I received his old desk chair with a ribbon on it for my 10th birthday. It made a squeak sound. His sneakers were still odorous. I didn't voice any complaints. "Thank you," I said, because I believed that good girls were always appreciative. I performed poems in front of the entire district and won science competitions at school. "Of course you did," they said. "The quiet one is you." We had a barbecue after Madison passed his driver's test on the second attempt. "He's the achiever," they said. That day, I recall standing by the cooler, replenishing the ice, while Mom swung her hands around, informing everyone, "He's making progress. He is the family star." I was asked what I did. Claire's mother grinned courteously, steady, trustworthy. She enjoys her work. She was unaware of my actions. Or perhaps she did. She simply didn't believe it was important to say. I uploaded a graduation picture to the family group chat as soon as I received my nursing degree. Nobody answered. However, Madison received a barrage of "so proud of you" comments after sharing a grainy picture of his third effort at a startup concept, and emojis of fire. I wished I could be pleased for him. Yes, I did. However, I couldn't help but wonder, what went wrong? Why did I never seem like enough? After I received my first actual paycheck, I began sending money home. They didn't inquire. They simply anticipated. My father used to joke, "Claire is paid as a nurse. She is the family's fallback option." They chuckled. And so did I. I then saw that joke become actual bills, deposits, and sacrifices. When did their water heater break? I made the payment. When Madison went on business travels and maxed out his card, I talked about it. When Mom wanted to take Dad on a vacation as a surprise, it was made possible in part by me. Always, they framed it as a favor. No commitments. However, they only ever asked me. And I always replied in the affirmative, because I had the hope that they might see me someday. Perhaps it was how love operated, similar to loyalty points. If you contribute enough, you will eventually be redeemed. However, it doesn't. Some people don't perceive the prices, they just see what you give them. I got a letter from Miss Claire Bennett a few weeks after Madison was given the house. The mortgage company sent it. Perhaps that was an error, I thought. They might have been updating documents. However, I froze when I opened it. My name appeared there as a cosigner. Years ago, I was unaware that a debt had been refinanced under my credit. I had gradually paid it off with the funds I believed I was just contributing to. That residence, the one they parted with, had my name inscribed beneath its base. Not in pen, though. In debt. In silent, obedient, unspoken debt. I was ill. More than that, though, I felt stupid. I had believed I was a part of something for years, that I would be important one day, that people would notice me. However, the reality was more obvious than before. I wasn't the fallback option. The unseen sponsor was me, the financial and emotional contributor forgotten and unacknowledged. I also didn't cry that night. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and invoices that served as a shrine to the life I sacrificed for those who never applauded me. Something inside of me changed once again during that silence. This time, a louder voice, "You've always been sufficient." Simply put, they could never see it. I exhaled. I started making copies of all the papers I owned. I was unsure of my next course of action. However, I was certain of one thing: their story was over now. I owned it. I believe the air changed when I said no for the first time. It wasn't noisy. There was no drama. It was silent, hardly discernible. "Would you be able to arrive early, Claire, to assist with setting up your brother's celebration dinner?" As usual, Mom had requested. "We want the house to look great for his meeting with investors this week." I stopped. I didn't clear my schedule. I didn't say I was sorry. I merely stated, "I will be unable to arrive early." I didn't provide an explanation after that. "No, I apologize. Work was late. I'll see what I can do, though." Simply put, no. There was a brief but telling silence on the other end of the call. Then she said, strainedly, "Okay, I'll figure it out, I suppose." I also gave her permission. That was the start. My brother was balancing a lot with his startup, so the next time they asked if I could help out a little with Dad's birthday surprise, I said, "Not this month." Why they didn't ask. They simply fell silent and went on. No fight broke out. Avoid conflict. only a gradual deterioration of the previous expectations. And I sensed it, like if I were passing through a house with the central heating turned off. The warmth was gone, but everything appeared the same. I also began to retreat in other directions. Not every group call was attended by me. Not every message in the family conversation received a response from me. Additionally, my responses were brief when I did reply, colder, factual. The happy emoticons and exclamation points were gone. The girl who made an effort to be easy to adore was no more. It wasn't retaliation. Relief was felt, like at last letting go of a belt that had been holding you back for too long. Naturally, they noticed. However, nobody stated it out loud. Rather, I would receive passive-aggressive comments. Claire is most likely working on her spreadsheets once more. Or you are aware of her nature, always so serious. I didn't stand up for myself. They weren't corrected by me. Let them speak. I had finished controlling their emotions. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I got a voicemail from an unfamiliar bank. The woman spoke in a courteous, businesslike tone. "Hello, Miss Bennett. This is Northwest Lending's Jennifer. Regarding the small company loan you co-signed for Mr. Madison Bennett, I'm checking in. To complete clearance, we simply require an updated financial disclosure. I may be reached at." Halfway through the message, I stopped it. Co-signed? Nothing had been co-signed by me. My heart pounded. I looked through my emails, my messages, my documents. Nothing. Not approved. No signature. No reference to a loan. Nothing but quiet. I returned the bank call. Before a man finally responded with caution, I was moved thrice. "Are you implying that you didn't consent to repay the loan?" "That's right," I said bluntly. A pause occurred. He cleared his throat after that. "We do, however, have a scanned copy of the paper. I'll email it to you right away." The file was delivered in a matter of minutes. My whole name, social security number, and signature were all there. However, that signature wasn't penned by me. Not lately, not in that file. The scan was outdated, from many years ago, one that I had submitted for something entirely different, possibly for the mortgage that I had previously assisted with. It had been utilized again. It was forged by them. And it wasn't a mistake or a jest this time. It was illegal. I spent a lot of time looking at the screen. I didn't identify the wrath that surged in my chest. It wasn't the exploding, flaming sort. No, it was chilly, managed, steady, like a lake's ice formation. I got up, went to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water for myself. I had steady hands. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I restarted my laptop and began gathering all of my documents, including old emails, bank statements, loan applications, and tax records. After that, I looked for a lawyer in a new tab. I didn't get any sleep that night. Not because I was nervous. However, I was awake in a manner that I hadn't experienced in years, recognized the reality, to the truth of their actions, to the realization that all of the years of assistance had been little more than covert exploitation. I hadn't merely been used by them. They had based their entire existence on the assumption that I wouldn't defend myself. They thought I would remain silent indefinitely. They were mistaken. I had a video conference with a legal advisor the following morning. She had heard it all before. Therefore, she was youthful, observant, and unconcerned by my story. As she tapped her pen against a legal pad, she remarked, "They used your digital signature without consent. That is deception." I gave a nod. "To get a loan, they used your credit score as leverage." His was probably too low. One more nod. "Your credit should be frozen. Modify your passwords. The paper trail will now begin." I let out a breath, and I felt like I had someone on my side for the first time in a long time. Not relatives. However, someone who recognized the truth as it was. I persisted in my silent resistance in the days that followed. Every bank transaction was examined by me. My name was deleted from previous accounts. I turned off automatic transfers. I changed the passwords. I banned phone numbers. I didn't give an explanation. I didn't tell anybody. I just disappeared from their financial sphere. They also took note. Yes, they did notice. Madison sent the first message. "Hello, sister. I was just curious if you and the bank were able to resolve that issue. They claim that you backed out, but that isn't possible. Shall we have a conversation?" I didn't respond. Mom called. No voicemail. Then another. Then another. Next, a message. What's going on, Claire? You must help your brother. You're not being fair. I didn't answer, since their shouts were eventually drowned out by the truth. At last, I was listening to it. I had had enough of serving as a safety net for a family that never gave me a sense of security. I'm done being the invisible yet helpful ghost in their home. I'm done waiting for recognition that would never come. This was not retaliation. Reclamation was what this was. Of my name, of my voice, of my value. My quiet had been interpreted as weakness by them. They were about to discover the true meaning of that quiet. I kept what I was doing a secret. It was no longer their right to know, not because I was scared. I sat down with a cup of black coffee at my kitchen table that weekend and entered into all the accounts that had ever been associated with my name, including shared savings accounts, old joint accounts, and everything I had previously signed up for out of obligation or trust. Click taken out. Click closed, click frozen. I was surprised by how clean it was. When I took my name out of the little trust fund that had been set aside for emergencies, the one that I had contributed to but never accessed, there were no inquiries. My family apparently thought I had forgotten about it. I hadn't. Simply put, they thought I was forgetting since they were so accustomed to my silence. I stopped setting up automatic transfers to assist with Dad's drug copays. I stopped sending Mom the monthly grocery fund. I politely and professionally called the accountant who had been managing my parents' taxes for the last 3 years to let her know that I would no longer be handling their financial management. The person on the other end of the line paused. She remarked, "You've always been the one keeping things organized." "Yeah," I said. Nothing else could be said. My family started calling more frequently. In a week, my normally silent phone showed more missed calls than it had in months. "Claire, we must speak. How come you're making things so hard? Just give me a call back, please." I didn't. But I did read their messages. A curiosity, not a sense of shame. It was interesting to see them fall apart. They were unable to express exactly what they needed from me. They were unable to publicly acknowledge that they needed your name. "We require your credit. Your stability is essential to us." They danced around it instead. They made a mistake. They were appealing to relatives. They baited me with my brother's business. One evening, Madison texted, "I just need help to get through this round of funding. Money isn't even the main factor. Credibility is key. The banks are more likely to trust me if you are listed." Was that all there was to it? To them, I was not a person. I was a name, a point, a rating of walking acceptability. After reading the message, I switched off my phone. A loan officer from a different bank called me a few days later. "One more loan. This is the last time I will use it. My name again." I requested that the documents be sent to me this time. I gazed at the signature next to mine when they got there. Naturally, it belonged to Madison. My name was there once more, ripped from an old form and put at the bottom as a formality. It lacked motivation. Careless. Not even the use of a new version had occurred to them. I gave my lawyer a call. She let out a sigh. "They are obviously in need. They no longer even conceal it. It's because they thought you wouldn't defend yourself. They base their entire system on silent obedience from people like you. Furthermore, you served as their cornerstone." I thought about what she said for a long time. I had served as their cornerstone. Steady, predictable, quiet. I had withdrawn now. They were disintegrating. After a while, Mom left a voicemail. She didn't sound sorry. She sounded annoyed. "I have no idea what's going on with you, Claire. Why are you behaving strangely? Your sibling is taking on a significant task. Something significant. And all you can think about are principles and paperwork." I gave it 2 listens. After then, it was erased. They weren't upset with me because I had acted improperly. They were upset because I was no longer fulfilling their expectations. Since they no longer had the handbook and the regulations had changed, they were upset. I went 2 whole weeks without responding to anyone. It was the best sleep I'd had in months. In every evening, I went for a long stroll. I prepared actual food for myself. I even finished painting a little canvas that had been on my shelf for more than a year. It wasn't very excellent. It was mine, though. Furthermore, nobody was able to claim any of it. It was impossible to forge. I couldn't be coerced into giving it up. Then my door was knocked on. My parents were standing there like two ill-practiced actors, and I wasn't shocked to see them. As usual, Mom's makeup was flawless. Dad was holding a binder tightly under his arm. Mom's voice, which attempted to sound kind but ended up sounding more staged than real, said, "Hello, sweetheart." I moved aside, but I didn't ask them to take a seat. Dad said, "We just wanted to talk." "Make the air clear." I arched an eyebrow. "What is it about?" He cleared his throat. "There has been some misunderstanding regarding a few money issues. Perhaps Madison misunderstood a few things." I remained silent. They bided their time until I spoke. I didn't. Mom's smile finally wavered. "Don't be cold, Claire. We remain family." It was at that point that something clicked. They weren't here because they were sorry, I realized. I was useless, which is why they were here. Dad reached for the folder and said, "We want to make things right." There was a pile of documents inside, including revised paperwork, new loan terms, and pre-filled signatures. It was a trap. They were offering me a place at the table once more, but only if I could bring the table. I gave them a look, glanced closely, and I didn't feel smaller for the first time in years. I felt motionless. "Be calm." I was the sole one standing, like if a hurricane had passed. "No," I said plainly. They blinked. "No to what?" Mom inquired. "No to everything." Dad started. "I don't think you understand." I interrupted him. "No, you're not understanding." I approached the door, flung it open, and stood by. "Leave now, please. However, Claire, right now." They left without saying a word. I softly shut the door after them. After that, it was locked. I sat down at my workstation that evening and jotted down all of the account numbers, each and every password, each and every joint liability. I then set the paper on fire. Yes, it was symbolic. However, it seemed genuine, similar to a conclusion, similar to a cleanse, like a subtle, tasteful kind of retaliation. Retaliation was never the goal, not in the dramatic sense, not in the sense of destroying everything. I just wanted my life back. I had no intention of ruining anyone else's. However, if it meant that some facts had to be revealed, then so be it. I gave my parents exactly what they had given me for all these years after their visit. Quiet, distance, icy disregard. Then I did something. 2 weeks later, the family supper was planned. They called it an annual tradition to maintain everyone's proximity. Naturally, I hadn't received an invitation. However, I invited myself this time. I didn't have on any fancy clothes. No grand entrance. Just a little manila packet in one hand, a plain outfit, and clean shoes. When I initially entered the dining room, I heard Madison's voice. "I just need a little more credibility," the bank said, "and then we'll be good to go. Venture investors are prepared to take action." The room went silent when he looked up in the middle of his statement. You would believe that I was a ghost. With a forced smile, my mother got to her feet. "Claire, you didn't mention your arrival." "No," I said, "I didn't." Dad cleared his throat. "Do you want to take a seat?" I walked calmly toward the head of the table and said, "No need." In my hand, the package felt light, yet it was heavier than all the shame I had held for so long. With a firm voice, I said, "I won't take much of your time. I came here to return something that wasn't mine." Madison scowled. "What are you discussing?" I gave him a quick glance before gently thumping the envelope in front of him. After he paused, he opened it. Within, copies of the loan documents that were falsified, the formal statement from my lawyer, a bank statement that demonstrates their usage of my identity and credit. The room became incredibly quiet. "I claimed you were responsible for this. I could also file charges. I won't, though." "Claire," Mom said in a shaky voice. "No, let me be done. You believe I'm cold, and I know it, because I'm far away. That I'm difficult to adore. Perhaps I am, but this is how you made me." Dad opened his mouth, but he refrained from speaking due to the weight of the documents before him. I quietly gave all for years. I had 2 jobs. I contributed to the mortgage payment. Even though you didn't say why, I sent the money when you asked. Madison got the house from you, the vehicle, the name of the family. I also got a lottery ticket from you. A few uncomfortable giggles echoed across the room. They believed that I was using metaphors. I said, "I scratched it out of courtesy. That's all." More quiet. $6 million. Like thunder, I let the words fall. Madison blinked. Hold on a minute. I prevailed at 6 millions, money. I gave them all a direct glance. Furthermore, you won't ever see a dime. It was so quiet that it could have broken glass. Dad's face lost its color. Unable to come up with a word, Mom's mouth opened. Madison reclined in his seat as though he had been shoved. I went on, I don't want anything from you. I am not seeking your approval. This is not an expression of gratitude, and most definitely not your justifications. I took one final glance around the room. The one who shouted the loudest got everything and disregarded the silent builder of everything. Then I grinned. Not a sour grin, not a mean one. One last, kind grin. I will no longer be your second guess. After saying that, I turned and left. I changed my number that evening. I went out of town 2 days later, and after a week, I secretly bought a house in the same area where they resided. Not with malice. However, I could, because the keys now belonged to me, the one with authority. They were just neighbors, too. Not relatives. Only names in a faded book of addresses. Not all of the fallout happened at once. Waves of it came. Little tremors prior to the actual collapse. My neighbor was the first to tell me about it. During their daily strolls, a woman named Rachel would engage in gossip with my mother. I met her at a downtown bookshop, she said. I thought you moved away, in a curious and incredulous tone. I put a novel back on the shelf and said, I did. She lowered her voice and leaned in, saying, Your father's company is in serious trouble. Something about investors withdrawing. As though the information were new, I nodded. Rachel's head cocked. Are you all right? I'm great, I said. I meant it too. The first letter came 3 weeks after the dinner. Madison was the source. Not typed, but written. Careless handwriting. No address for return. Claire, I am aware that things have been difficult. You didn't need to make us look bad. We've addressed your point. Could we please go on? Here, I'm drowning. I didn't answer. In his second letter, he begged, claiming that he was being sued, that the sale had fallen through, and that Dad held him responsible for the family's financial demise. He never expressed regret. He never once apologized for using your name, or we treated you in a way that you didn't deserve. Excuses only. Simply panic. Desperation alone. An old college acquaintance of mine who had developed into a discreet power figure in local development had been Dad's main source of funding. I had never boasted that I knew him. I wasn't like that. But I contacted him once everything was revealed. A copy of the falsified documents was sent to him. Asked if he was still at ease making investments in those who pledged their daughter's identity as security. He didn't. He withdrew within a week. Avoid conflict. Not a drama. The same hands that once pointed at me and declared I wasn't worth the risk are now steadily tightening their financial noose. My parents reportedly needed to refinance the house. Not the one Madison was given. He had already used that one to finance his unsuccessful venture. No, they refinanced their own house, which they never permitted me to remain in, not even during my darkest years. I was once told that I was too old to return. They couldn't afford to keep me away now. The irony was delicious and bitter. I accidentally bumped into my mom. She was entering a cafe as I was leaving. Our gazes met. She stopped. She appeared older, smaller. The edges of her meticulously preserved composure grew faded. Claire, she muttered. I didn't grin. I didn't say hello to her. I chose to move aside and let her go without saying anything. That quiet? It struck her more forcefully than any insult could. A month later, I moved into my new residence. Everything I loved and nothing I owed were all within walking distance of this peaceful home on a corner property. It wasn't very big. However, it was stunning. Wood that is warm. Large windows. I actually had time to take care of this garden. I got a dog through adoption. Resumed painting, drove along the coast on the weekends without informing anyone. And nobody inquired. My life was mine for the first time. Not borrowed, not negotiated, not subject to any conditions. I won't lie, though, it still stung some days. I never received a call on those birthdays. Even though I never used their numbers, I kept them saved on my phone. The pain of understanding that, despite everything, I still questioned why they couldn't love me the way I had pleaded for love. But after that, I would go outside. From the front yard, smell the jasmine. Let me feel the warmth of the sun. and never forget that I didn't require their affection. I needed to be at peace. I received a knock on the door one evening. Dad was there. He appeared unfamiliar as he stood on my porch. He held a folder. Tired eyes, imposed dignity. He said, "I didn't come to argue." I remained silent. "I come to give this back." He gave me the revised copy of my birth certificate in the folder. My name underwent a change. "Legally, my last name is now linked to his," he said. "I should have done this a long time ago. The folder was not taken by me." "Claire," I answered. "You came to erase guilt in order to avoid giving me something that I already have." He gave me a prolonged gaze. Then he gave a nod. I put the folder on the railing of my porch and turned to leave. Overnight, I left the folder there. It was wet from the dew in the morning. I tossed it aside, since I was no longer in need of proof. Not his name. He didn't regret it. Not at all. The things you cling to are peculiar, not the names, the pictures, or the items, but the sense of being left out. When the laughter stops and you remain standing there, invisible, there is quiet. For years, I bore that burden. Like a second skin, I wore it. However, it wasn't until I put it down that I realized how heavy it had become. Quietly, my coffee shop opened. No family ribbon cutting event. No publicity. Only a chalkboard sign with skewed letters, me and a few inquisitive strangers. A nurse on break was the first client. The second was a retired professor who stayed for hours and ordered tea. They were unaware of my past. My last name was not questioned. I was just given the name Claire, and that was sufficient for the first time in my life. I painted in the late summer light that seeped through the counter during the day and on the porch during the evenings. There were moments when I questioned whether someone from my past would appear. However, nobody did. Then I understood that I didn't miss them. Not at all. I missed the concept of them, the family that had only ever lived in my mind. This version, however, had never resided here. This version had never resided here at home. Not in this silence. Now I had the genuine thing. I'd discovered an envelope when I went to the mailbox one morning. My initial name in poor handwriting, no name, no return address. There was one lottery ticket inside. I noticed it and laughed. Not a word, no justification. It was the same move that once attempted to hide 1,000 silent wounds. Like art, I pinned it to my refrigerator. Not that I desired to play once more, but because, long before the numbers were drawn, I had already won. Months later, they made another attempt to get in touch. My mom left me a voicemail. "Your brother is having difficulties, Claire. He has asked you to co-sign a loan for his business. Please give me a call back. We want to speak." I didn't return the call. I refrained from screaming. I didn't become angry. I simply erased the message and stood by the window for a while, observing the rain. There are certain people who never change. You have to stop waiting for them to do it. Yet, some people do. A year went by. Next, 2. And I became aware of something strong, something freeing. Wealth isn't the finest form of retaliation. It doesn't refute them. Peace prevails. It is so quiet and profound that it is impervious to remorse, recollection, or even the pain of what might have been. Someone I met. He was nice, soft-spoken, the type of man who didn't try to correct the past, but also didn't interrupt when I discussed it. "You don't owe anyone your forgiveness just because they share your blood," he once told me. I believe I fell in love with him at that point, because he didn't recoil when he saw the fight inside me. I sometimes remember that supper table after I closed the store, the toast. I was not a part of the laughs, the sensation of having only a scratch ticket and being the invisible daughter. However, I am no longer that girl. She remained. I left with a peaceful heart and a future made of ashes, as she sat peacefully. I now reside in a home of my own choosing. Work in a store I constructed. Get out of bed without dread. Love without pleading. And dream without boundaries. I am no longer the forgotten one. I'm not the last thing on the list. Not the backup. Not the safety net. The basis is me, of my own existence. If you've ever been told that your value is dependent on anything else, if you've ever been encouraged to smile despite being given less, if you've ever been used, ignored, or erased, recognize this: the issue is not with you. Furthermore, you are not weak by remaining silent. You become the hurricane they didn't anticipate. Who shares your blood is not your family. It's someone who recognizes your value without requiring you to prove it. And if you haven't been noticed yet, you are still important. You did it every time.